Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I'm so happy that you're here. In today's lesson, we're going to be talking a little bit more about what we're going to learn in this class, as well as what is history. I will also be introducing your work for today. So I'm really excited. So let's get going. So, first things first. It feels really important for me as a teacher to acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land. As you learned last year in Minnesota Studies, there were many Indigenous people that lived here in Minnesota before all of us living here. So we will continue to talk about this, as well as the fact that Black Lives Matter. As you know, there's been a lot of protests throughout this last few months in order for people to voice the fact that we need to end police brutality and value the lives of Black people in this country. So we will continue to talk much more into detail about those two things. You might be wondering what American Studies is all about. And in this class, we're going to be discussing and learning different things about American history. For example, who was here first? Who were the indigenous people that lived here first? How did the United States become a country? We're going to also be learning about the Constitution and founding documents, as well as a westward expansion and how the United States became what it is today. So, as I mentioned, yes, this is your history class, and we're going to learn about important historical events and people in the United States. So, last year, you spent a lot of time learning about Minnesota in Minnesota Studies, and this is where we are. This year, we're going to be spending a lot of time learning about all of these different places. And we're going to begin what we do in this part of the country right here, which is where the first colonies were created. And next year, you will learn much more about the world in the class that you will have called Global Studies. So anyway, what is history? So history is the study of changes throughout time. It is made up of stories about the past, and it is different depending on different perspectives and who is telling the story. So you can have one event, but people might remember it differently, or people might have different perspectives. For example, if you get into a fight with one of your siblings, you might have one perspective, and your sibling might have another perspective of why you even got into that fight, right? So one of my favorite things about history is that it can help explain how we've gotten to where we've gotten today. So I've mentioned this multiple times now, and there's been a lot of Black Lives Matter protests during the summer 2020, and there's a long legacy in this country that has gotten us to where we are today, and this begins with slavery, then continued with racist laws that were created after slavery ended. And then there's been a lot of violence against Black Americans. So those are just some examples of how we've gotten to where we are today. And again, we'll continue to unpack this and talk about it more throughout the school year. When we study history, we must rely on evidence, and we must think of history kind of like we're detectives, and we're looking at different pieces of evidence that are going to help us make sense of the world around us and historical events around us. So there's two main pieces of evidence that we're going to be using throughout the year. The first one is primary sources right here, which are first-hand accounts of events that have happened, and they're written and created during a specific historical time by people who lived through that time. So these things are things such as diaries, letters, autobiographies, which are books created by somebody telling the story of their own life. Also, photographs can give us a snapshot of a specific historical moment. And then we have secondary sources that were created by somebody else and their interpretations of history. And this includes textbooks as well as encyclopedias. So today, we're going to begin we're going to dive into history by creating a mini autobiography. And mini means little, and you can think of it as mini M&Ms. They're the little M&Ms, right? And an autobiography is a book or publication about someone's life written by that person. So, for example, Michelle Obama recently wrote a book about her own life told by her. So that's what we're going to be doing a little bit. So how we're going to get started is that you are going to brainstorm 4 significant events in your life, and you're going to write a little bit about each of them. I wrote my examples in this kind of greenish color. So if I was thinking about 4 significant events in my life, I would think about moving to Minnesota from Guatemala. Becoming a teacher was also a very significant moment. Moving to Washington State with my husband was also a big significant event in my life. And also running a half marathon was pretty significant. So you will identify those 4 things. You will write a little bit about them in a graphic organizer. And then afterwards, you are going to interview a family member or a friend that was part of those events. And you are going to ask them what they remember about those events. So, for example, when I'm writing about moving to Minnesota from Guatemala, I'm going to call my mom and ask her, "Hey, Mom, what do you remember about moving to Minnesota from Guatemala way back when?" So that is going to help me include different details and different things that maybe I don't remember about that experience and that event in my life. So you will need to turn in the graphic organizer filled out before our next class, because we're going to be using it to develop our mini autobiography. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. That's my email right there. I'm happy to schedule a Google Meets with you, or just answer small questions if you'd like, or if you have any. Lastly, make sure that you're completing all 4 things in today's lesson. So the first one was that Padlet discussion, where you're writing what do you know already about United States history and what you'd like to know. And this is really important because it's going to help me guide where we take our learning in this next few months. So make sure to complete that. The next piece is that you're going to watch this lesson, which you are doing right now. And then you are going to complete the graphic organizer. And lastly, you are going to complete the exit ticket on Flipgrid. So please let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them for you. And don't forget to finish all these things before our next lesson. Have a beautiful day, and I look forward to seeing you on Google Meet.